I now yield to Ranking Member Schrader, who will introduce our next witness.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's my pleasure to introduce Mr. Odysseus Lanier from one of the four founding partners of McConnell, Jones, Lanier, and Murphy, LLP. Over 180 full-time employees. That's great. 3 office locations. Mr. Lanier's firm is the third largest African-American-owned accounting and consulting firm in the United States. Mr. Lanier also, I hope I'm getting the name correct. Am I close enough?
You're correct.
Thank you. Hate to keep repeating the wrong name.
You're okay. You're okay.
Mr. Lanier leads the firm's Federal Services Group, which specializes in working with federal, state, and local government agencies, much-needed service by providing strategic planning, financial management, and operations review and support services. With more than 33 years of professional experience, he has extensive knowledge of federal, state, and local procurement policy, procurement strategies, contracting processes, and process improvement projects. So we look forward to your comments in particular. Welcome, Mr. Lanier.
Thank you very much. Good morning, Chairman Walsh, ranking members, Schrader, and members of the subcommittee. Thank you for the opportunity to appear at today's hearing. And my name is Odysseus Lanier, and I'm a CPA. I'm a partner with the firm of McConnell, Jones, Lanier, and Murphy, located in Houston, Texas. As ranking member Schrader has stated, there are 180 professionals in my firm, and we have annual revenues of $17 million. I lead my firm's Federal Services Group and specialize, as you said, in working with federal, state, and local government. I am pleased today to be testifying on behalf of the American Institute of Certified Public Accountants, of which I am a member. I'm specifically here, though, to discuss a suitable small business size standard for NACE codes 541-211, Offices of Certified Public Accountants, and 541-219, Other Accounting Services, as they most directly affect the work performed by the federal government, performed for the federal government by CPA firms. We commend the SBA for undertaking a comprehensive review of the existing small business size standards and thoughtfully, I want to emphasize thoughtfully, applying a statistically valid methodology which would raise the current standard from $8.5 million to $14 million in receipts. During a recent meeting I attended with representatives of the AICPA, other CPAs, and the SBA's size standard team, it became evident that the data used by the SBA did not adequately reflect the accounting profession. As a result of that meeting, the American Institute of CPAs provided the SBA alternative data compiled from surveys of CPA firms conducted by the AICPA in an industry publication. Taking the AICPA's data and using the SBA's size standard methodology, I calculated that a more appropriate standard would be at a minimum $19 million in receipts. Beyond these objective data-driven calculations warranting an increase from $14 million to $19 million, the AICPA proposes increasing the small business size standard to $25.5 million to compensate for other secondary factors in the middle market that affect the ability of small accounting firms to effectively compete for contracts in the federal marketplace. Importantly, 2 of those factors are primarily driven by discussions and suggested changes over the years in federal government procurement policy. An acquisition policy to reduce the number of vendors and increase the size of federal procurements. As you know, we're talking about reducing government. And also, the current use of the sources sought and request for information notices to literally determine if contractors are qualified prior to issuing an RFP as part of an acquisition planning strategy. Importantly, to fully capture the small accounting firms that have the adequate resources in infrastructure, personnel, and cash flow to properly perform services in the federal arena reserved for just small business contractors, we believe the size limit would need to be raised to $25.5 million. This higher limit is necessary to promote growth of these small accounting firms and to avoid this arbitrary cutoff in the middle of the market segment where a firm would quickly outgrow a lower size standard and be forced to compete most likely and most unsuccessfully with the largest firms. And the nuance in our business is the largest firms are the big four, which average about $6.8 billion in revenue. $17 million doesn't compete with $6 billion when you classify it as large. Let me talk a moment about my own firm as an illustration. When my partners and I formed our firm in 1999, having begun our businesses on the proverbial kitchen tables several years earlier, we had 28 full-time employees, no federal contracts, and a single-minded focus to build one of the largest African-American-owned accounting and consulting firms in the United States. In 2003, we were awarded our first federal contract, had 42 employees, and only $4.5 million in revenue. Over that time, we haven't taken money out. We have made substantial investments in business development and back-office infrastructure and technology, and proudly serve the federal, state, and local government markets. But by 2008, we exceeded the SBA's $8.5 million size standard limit. Since then, we've had to compete for federal contracts as a large business and have not been nearly as successful because the infrastructure required to support our $14 to $17 million in revenues pales in comparison to the infrastructure of our competitors. Firms who have from $358 million to $10 billion in revenue and are 20 to 500 times larger than we are. Not surprisingly, our firm and other small firms like ours are finding it virtually impossible to compete in a federal market unless the SBA implements a significantly larger small business size standard. I encourage the subcommittee to urge the SBA to revisit the small business size standard for NAICS codes 541-211, offices of certified public accountants, and 541-219, other accounting services, and consider the factors I've discussed. It is widely recognized, as we all know, that small business is an important component in the economic health of our country. It's the engine that drives this economy. Why would you want to cut out a segment of the industry that would be able to provide value to the federal government as a small business? An increase in the small business size standard to $25.5 million will result in more opportunities for small accounting firms to provide federal agencies with high-quality, value-added services while at the same time fueling our economy. Thank you again for the opportunity to come and testify at today's hearing, and I look forward to your questions.